What's going on, everyone? This is Conversations with Brian and Elijah, episode number 8. And today we will be talking about identity, how one person gets an identity, and how that can impact a person's emotions or psychological habits and different things of that nature. Elijah, you want to go ahead and get us started with a couple of thoughts, and then we could go back and forth?
Yeah, I think it's important to first explain what we mean by identity, and I think I want to get your definition of that too.
Yep.
But yeah, just to add more context to what we're talking about. We want to basically talk about people get their identities in all sorts of things. Entrepreneurs, their business is their identity. If you're a sports player, sports may be your identity. Some people get their identity with their boyfriend or girlfriend. So we want to talk about those kind of things and discuss if it's good or bad. Maybe there needs to be a balance, stuff like that. So, Brian, I want to first ask, where do you think your identity is? Like, what is your definition of identity?
I would say identity, in a very broad way, is how you view your place in the world, and for good or for bad, right? So you could view your place in the world, it could be that, maybe you don't think you have a place in the world, and that could be a bad thing. Or, like you said, you're like, everyone knows you as the soccer person. Like, if there's one, it's like the one thing that everyone knows that you engage, the activity you engage in, and that could be good or bad. So that's how I would broadly think about identity and maybe even define it.
Yeah, so I mean, I just looked up the definition on Google. Google says the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. So, I don't know if that does a good enough job of what we're getting at, but I think, yeah, I like your definition and like how you just explained it really well, actually. I think that was perfect. But yeah, Brian, do you think that it's good that someone has their identity in one thing? Like, for example, an entrepreneur, they just see themselves as their business is their identity, right? They don't really feel like their life has meaning, or they're really a person if their business is sucking. Or a football player, their whole identity is being a football player, and yet, they get hurt or something happens to them, that really messes them up. Do you think it's good to have your identity being one thing, or do you think that's a bad thing for sure?
Well, I think that over time, and maybe you agree with this, maybe not. I think over time, your identity kind of adapts to A, your surroundings, and B, your priorities, sort of. So, what I really, really identify with now may not be the same thing that I identify with, say, in 20, 30 years, right? So I think over time, your identity changes. And I don't know, do you think identity is rooted in a core set of beliefs and like
Well,
principles?
like what kind of, like, what do you mean? What
Like,
kind of beliefs?
I stand for your moral code. Like, is that the one thing that doesn't change in terms of your identity? So like, I will never steal anything, or I'm rooted in being a good friend, or I'm rooted in being a good citizen of a particular country. Like your moral code. Do you think that those things change over time with identity, or are they like rooted in one thing?
Um, this may be surprise you, but I feel like the answer to that would be a person finding their identity in those things. Finding their identity in being a person of high character. I will not steal. I will not cheat. I will not lie. That would be an identity of being a good person. Um, I don't know if you're asking, do you mean that do morals change as time goes on? Like, or
Yeah, in a sense.
I think a person could be corrupted to where their morals um, they get more comfortable doing things, but I think deep down inside, they would still know that something is wrong because I think our moral code is deeply ingrained into us.
Hmm.
Think,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah,
So I mean, we're kind of getting a little bit broader here, but um, so I think the word is entropy. Are you familiar with entropy?
I am not.
Okay, entropy, I believe. Let me look it up. Or entropy, or there's a word. I forget what the word is. I'll try to find it right here. But oh no, yeah, I think it's entropy. Basically, entropy is the state that everything is going towards disorder. So if if you don't cut the grass, if you don't cut your lawn, it'll just keep growing. The weeds will keep growing. Everything will just keep growing.
Yeah,
It'll be more disorderly.
yeah.
So the world basically, it's this idea that the world is in, if left to its own devices, is going towards disorder. So tying it back to like human psychology and kind of identity, do you think that if left to our own devices, we are going towards a state of bad, sort of like going towards a state of disorder, and we influence goodness, which helps us not be corrupted, basically?
It's a two-part question, I feel. So I'm going to start with part one. So just to clarify, do you mean that without government or some type of rule, some type of authoritative rule to a certain degree, not super authoritative, just some type of authority? Without that, we would ultimately, what was the word again? Entropy? Go towards
Entropy, yeah. Go
entropy?
towards a state of entropy, yeah.
Yeah. Is that what your question is? Without authority?
Basically, yeah. Hmm.
Um, This is very interesting. Have you ever explored the ideas of anarcho-capitalism or anarcho-communism?
Uh, like headline reading only. I haven't really delved deep into it.
Yeah, so that's what kind of comes to mind to me because it's really like a debate like that in terms of that.
Do you,
Basically, with anarcho-capitalism, right? They argue that, and I don't know if I believe this or not. I'm very pro-market, pro-capitalist, but I don't know if I go this far. But basically, their whole thing is that if you really had a total free market, total capitalism with no government in place, you could still have a functioning society that would be beneficial. Um, and they talk about the prioritization of like everything. And so
hmm,
I don't know. In theory, that to me that it could work, but um, it does seem like you do need some type of hierarchy, some type of authority that keeps people from going chaotic. Because if there is no rule of law, it really does seem like um, people would be more tempted to do things and well, you know what, then again it depends on the people though, right? Because like without rule of law and you had a bunch of moral people that are, and I think educated and moral goes hand in hand for some reason. I really do. I don't know why, but I just think the more educated a person is, the more moral they're going to be. And so I think that if you had a group of people that are highly educated and their desires are to just advance their knowledge and make things better, problem solve, and just make things better, I don't necessarily think we would lead to a state of all chaos. Does that make
hmm.
sense? What I
Yeah. But I would say that you're sort of saying the same thing, right? So not necessarily there being like a government. Even without a government, there's still some untold societal laws,
social
right?
norms type of thing?
Social norms, right? So like if I were to sneeze without covering my mouth, it's not against the law to sneeze without covering your mouth, but people would look at me weird. Maybe someone will like say, hey, like maybe you should cover your mouth, or there's some social norms, right?
Yeah.
um so I guess maybe just to dig a little bit deeper, uh are people born moral, or do we have to be taught to be moral, right? So if we were um you know born just with no society, what would our brain naturally be inclined to do, right?
Yeah. So I think that I believe that there is an objective morality, um,
Yeah.
and I believe that um, in every single society, every different cultures, there's moral cores that are held everywhere. So I think that you're born with it, to be honest. However, I do think a person can go against that, though. They can go against what they know is right and wrong. But I do believe that there's a certain foundation of moral truths that every single culture practices. So, um, would you agree with that?
No, yeah, I would agree with that. And I think we talked about this in like the first couple episodes.
Yeah.
But to kind of dig a little, because this kind of goes hand in hand with identity, right? Your identity is your moral code, or you have a certain moral
Yeah,
code.
definitely could be.
And so I guess, to kind of, do you think that, so not necessarily that I agree with this, but morality doesn't necessarily change over time, right? You would agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think it changes.
Okay. But do you think that society has defined it? Meaning, if you were to go back to like caveman, uh, Homo sapiens, right?
Okay.
Um, is it, if they were to kill their own tribesmen, right? For that person violated a certain social norm. Well, I guess you could make an argument that that is moral, but is their moral code the same as today's moral code? Would you say?
I honestly don't even know how I would. I mean, I feel like I'm just kind of randomly guessing now. I don't know what I would base that off of.
Right, right.
What would you say?
I mean, it's an interesting thought though, right? Because like there has to be some kind of cutoff, right? So there is some kind of objective morality, right? But when did that objective morality like start, right? Because I guess if you were to take, let's say we have 10 human beings, right? We create this like pseudo society where we just have 10 human beings and we don't let them interact with anyone else in the world except with those 10. Would they develop the same morality that everyone else would have, or would their morality kind of be different, right? And the answer is, I mean, I don't necessarily know, but I would suspect that it sort of would be different, which would then kind of push back to, what is the objective morality, and like when did that start? um but I'm not sure.
Yeah, so this is really interesting to me. Have you ever heard of the argument that, well, if so, do you think that there's an ultimate standard of good? Like, let's go ahead and go with these premises, and then we'll go from there. Do you think there's an ultimate standard of good?
uh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then you also said that there's an objective morality, right?
Yeah.
Um, how do I? Hmm. So have you? I mean, have you heard that like, if there is an objective morality and there's an ultimate standard of good, what would that standard of good be? Where would that come from? It's almost like, I mean, if you take the characteristics of like God, right, described in religious texts, it almost feels like that's where that would come from. And like, I don't know, this gets into like if you believe in God or not now, but I mean, when you evaluate yourself, it's very hard for someone to very much say that there is no such thing as an objective morality. Because even if they say that it's relative, meaning, well, some things are true for you, not for me, well, that right there is a self-defeating statement, right? If you said, uh, there's no absolute truth, I could just ask you, well, is that absolutely true? If they say no, well then there you go, that's self-defeating. If they say
Right, right.
yes, I mean, you see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So everybody knows deep down inside, whether you want to think about God or not, we seem to have this expectation of how people should act. And the reason why I mention all the other cultures is because that right there to me excludes it being that, oh, it's all from it's all a culture thing. Like, hold on, let me better my thoughts. This is kind of complicated. What I'm trying to say is you have all these different cultures, right? Chinese culture is different than American culture, and Mexican culture is different than American culture too, right? Whatever, right? They're all different cultures, right?
Right, yeah.
Yet we still have the same morality. People don't like it when their spouse cheats on them. Where did that come from? Right? If you want to take the evolutionary route, evolution states that we are here to reproduce as much as possible.
Right.
So wouldn't it make scientific sense that you shouldn't get mad that someone's just reproducing with other people? Like, to me, that makes sense, right? But yet we still believe that our partner should not cheat on us. Where does that come from? We have this expectation of how we expect people to treat us, which is, when you think about it that way, you can very much see that there's like an objective morality that's ingrained into us. Does any of that make sense? Or
no, yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting because like there is definitely like a standard set of social norms, and
definitely,
it's interesting you said deep down inside, right? Like you would know whether something is right or wrong.
yeah.
I mean, I guess there's like some exceptions to that where people genuinely don't feel something deep down inside.
Sure.
Right. But yeah, I do think that there's definitely a standard set of social norms that kind of are you familiar with like globalization and the idea of it and how the globe is kind of turning into one? I think because of the internet and people's free access to kind of see what's going on in other parts of the world, I think it's starting to become one global culture where we're all kind of having similar sets of social norms.
Yeah, so you're saying like globalism, right? Like from a
Pretty
political
much.
point of view. Yeah, I've heard of it. Yep.
So like the idea that everyone is basically turning into one culture, sort of. And so I think because of that, everyone is starting to kind of adopt the same set of social norms. Like I'm fairly confident that killing someone who's innocent is probably wrong in basically every culture, right?
100%.
And it depends. I mean, then it depends how you would define innocent or not, right? But I think broadly speaking, that would be considered immoral.
Yeah, no, definitely. But the thing is like even before the internet and all this globalization, it was still wrong. Like if you look at history, it was still wrong. And so it's like, where did that come from? Right. And so it's really interesting when you trace it back.
Yeah. And okay, yeah. So then I guess the internet helped expose how similar our social norms maybe actually are. So it was the same before, but it kind of exposed that. So going back to identity,
Yeah.
right? And we kind of touched a little bit on it. So would you say that everyone is born with a set identity, or that it's kind of you're born with your identity is created based on your surroundings?
I think it's created. I think it's definitely created. I think that people kind of put it on themselves. I kind of think this ties into the self-image. I don't know if you're familiar with that psychological term, the self-image.
Yeah.
Basically how what happened?
I'm familiar with the self-image.
Yeah. And I think people build that based off of, what they put their identity in. I think we kind of choose our identity in a sense. Like,
go ahead.
It depends on, like going back to like boyfriend, girlfriend, right? A lot of people put their identity in their boyfriend or their girlfriend. And that is, that is their life. That is their everything. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't love someone. When you put your identity fully in someone, that's all you are now. But you're more than that. You're totally more than that. And so I don't think it's good to put your sole identity in one thing. Like for me, putting your sole identity into business or to putting it into school or to putting it into, whatever, that also can't be good, because that boyfriend, girlfriend may break up with you one day. That business may fail. Your school may get shut down. Like, there's all these different things that could stop it. And then what happens to your identity then? You got to find your identity in something higher than that. Something that's like, maybe multiple things. Maybe identity just doesn't need to be one thing, but multiple things. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it seems like you're tying in identity and happiness in a sense, right?
Well, I feel like, I would say that would you say that they go hand in hand?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I think your lack of identifying with something makes you feel sort of left out in a sense, right? Like, I think everyone kind of needs like a higher cause that's greater than themselves.
100%. Such a good point. Yeah, everybody needs a higher cause that's greater than themselves. I found that when I'm working for something that's greater than me, something that's selfless, for others, to serve others, that's when I'm happiest. So yeah, I think identity, when you place it in on one thing, I think you start to think real selfishly.
Yeah. And then kind of tying it into happiness too, having it, placing your identity in a higher cause is definitely important, but also putting it into multiple things so that you're never really, I think a word that you could use is feel let down if that source of identity kind of collapses on itself. And it kind of goes back to this idea. I don't know if I brought it up on this podcast, but like having multiple identity streams or happiness streams in a sense could really be important.
That's interesting.
So for example, really, really wealthy people talk about like diversifying your streams of income, right?
Yeah.
So if one stream of income stops, you still have 8 other streams,
Yep.
right? If you kind of think about it the same way like happiness, if you have 8 different streams of happiness, if one of them kind of lets you down or stops, you still kind of have those other 7 streams. And so that way you don't depend on one particular stream. And that stream could be a person, it could be an organization, an entity. It could be maybe yourself. I don't know, maybe we want to dive into that. Is it possible to make yourself happy with purely only yourself, or do you always need something else to make you happy? If that makes any sense. Because if you think about it, right, like, is it possible to make purely only yourself happy? If you were to have no other human contact, would you truly be happy? You kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be happy. I love people and need to interact and socialize. But I do think that you could be happy with yourself, like inner peace type of thing, right? It depends on what you desire. I think trying to have the approval of others, right? If you're basing your happiness on the approval of others, you're going to, your happiness, if it was like a graph, it's going to look like a person starting to die, up, down, and then just flat, because it's so unpredictable. Some people may approve of you, some people won't. It's too randomized. So that's not a good place to get your happiness from, on the approval of others. So I do think happiness got to start with yourself, but can it start with yourself? Just purely yourself. And I think it depends. You could be happy, doing things to better yourself. I think that would be right. That could be a source of happiness.
Yeah.
So I think it depends, but I do want to get more into that idea of having multiple streams of happiness. I never heard that. I would agree with that 100%. I think that's really good. I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so like sports is a stream of happiness for me. Business is a stream of happiness. Accomplishing things is a stream of happiness. Friends is a stream of happiness. Right? Like just things like that. And you have all these different areas to get happiness from.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for example, like sports, right? Sports are basically pretty much shut down right now, right? So if that's your only source of happiness, I mean that will kind of, you start to kind of wane away a little bit, right? It's important for you to have those multiple streams. And I'm trying to define those streams a little bit more, like where you can kind of get it from. But it's an interesting idea, right? Like, because there's this constant kind of, I feel like, tug at, don't care about people, but also it's kind of important to care about what other people think in a certain sense. And I think we talked about it last episode,
I
right?
got
Because
you. I have the answer. I have
yeah,
the answer to this dilemma. Don't care. Well, yeah, I mean, we could talk about the the circles of like how close you are to someone. That's how much you should care. But look, I want to preface this by saying I think that you should take criticism 100%, right? And you got to sometimes think. But when people are purely just hating on you, that's when you don't care, right? When they are just hating, and then you got to check their credibility, right? If it's an anonymous comment on the internet, oh, don't even care. That's a waste of time. Don't even look at it. What a waste of time. But if it's constructive criticism, they're giving you real points and whatever, consider that and take it so that you can improve yourself. Now, I also think that you should care about people in general. I think people should care about people greatly, actually. Help them out. Try to make them better, try to make them happier, try to be nice to them. Like, help people out is important. The whole idea to just not care about anything, no one, right? That's not a good idea, right? In terms of like, don't help anybody, all for yourself, just selfish, me, 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 me. I don't agree with that at all.
hmm,
And I think that actually hurts the person a lot, because I think that helping other people actually helps them.
hmm,
Do you
interesting.
agree with that assertion though?
Yeah,
That
yeah. It makes sense to me, and I think this is a great follow up to our previous podcast where we delved a little bit into like self esteem. I think it's super important to really try to um find your identity, whether that's like uh you know what we talked about, the multiple streams of identity, or something like that, and like don't wane away from that. Like be very firm in that identity, so that way when you get those forms of criticism, listen to them, right? um but if it's going to change your core identity or core moral or core beliefs, you shouldn't wane away from that core, right? So your core moral and principles shouldn't change based on what other people are saying.
yeah.
But at the same time, I want to make other people happy, and I like to listen to certain criticisms and what other people think of me, right? I think if everyone thinks that I'm a jerk, that I wouldn't want to be perceived as a jerk. But if it's going to change my core moral and principles, um then I would rather not care about what other people think in that sense, you know
Yeah.
and I think everyone should have those like 5 to 15 people that they really truly seek um maybe approval from, or that they truly care about,
Mhm.
and then outside of those 15 people, say, kind of be able to distinguish noise from actual constructive criticism.
Exactly. This is something that I actually do, and I can tell you it's very true. That's the 15 people very close inside your circle. With those people, I have my barrier down, right? My mental barrier, like a gate inside my brain, right? And what I mean by that is when I talk to them, I'm not defensive or being mentally tough or anything like that. I'm just being open, completely open. Anything comes in. right? Those are where your friends, your loved ones are at, because they can, you know that they like you, they have good intentions, and you trust them. Now with random people that I don't know and whatever, that's when I have my mental gates up. And that's when you get mentally tough. You start to, build that rock around you. And so like hate comments and random things that is going to try and influence you to get you to change. No, that's not getting through. I have a huge gate, not getting through. But with the close people, gates down, you can come through, easily pass, right? So does that analogy make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's a really good strategy. But more on identity, right? Why do you think some people base their identity in one thing? Why do some people put their identity in their boyfriend or their girlfriend or playing a sport or their business? Why only one thing?
Maybe I think maybe because it's easier to do so, right? Could be an obvious answer. Maybe it's kind of hard to, I don't know, maybe would you agree with this assessment that it's hard? It can be hard to find something you like, right? Because I think most people like things or dislike things? That's a pretty broad question, but like, do you find yourself liking everything, or do you find yourself not liking most things, or maybe even being neutral to most things, right? Like when I go sit on a chair, I mean, do I care about how the chair looks or how it feels, or am I just kind of just neutral about things, right? Unless like I'm a chair enthusiast.
I think it's both. I think it's both.
What do you mean?
I think with some things you are neutral, some things you do care, and some things you don't. For me, I like most things. I think it's just really if you're a positive or negative person. Like a lot of people just hate everything. This sucks, that sucks, the world sucks, he sucks, she sucks. Or me, I want to view the world through a positive lens. Or, that person's pretty cool. There's something fascinating about them. What is their story? They're interesting. I may not like the thing that they're interested in, but I'm interested in how interested they are in that thing. Right? That makes sense. So
yeah,
it just really depends on the person. I think positivity wins because you're going to be able to, interact more and be happier. If you just think everything sucks, well, then everything is going to suck. I really think how you choose to see things is how things are going to be. If I go and see the world as a negative place, negativity is going to be very easy to see because that's what I'm looking for. But if I'm going in the world looking for positivity, I'm going to see positivity everywhere. It's really just like that. It's really simple. It's really just how you choose to view things. And it is a choice, 100% a choice.
Do you think that most people view things through a positive lens? Or do you think most people are viewing it through a negative lens? Or, is it possible to view things through a neutral lens?
So
in
other words, you're asking, are people optimists, realist, or pessimist?
Basically.
That's once again, that's just kind of a hard, it's just like an anecdotal answer.
Right. Yeah.
With my logic, I guess, I associate that negativity or pessimism is closely related with negativity, right? More pessimistic you are, the more negative you're probably going to be. And there's a lot of negative people in the world. A lot of negativity thrives. So I guess most people are probably pessimistic. And you know what? I am starting to see that a lot now. Yeah, people are very pessimistic. And I just hate that. I hate that so much. It's so frustrating to talk to someone who doesn't believe in themselves, right? Like that bothers me. It really frustrates me because people need to realize the potential that they have. Like people could do so many great things, but they don't even want to take the chance of doing it. Oh, I'll probably lose, probably won't happen. I'll probably suck at it. I'll probably be terrible. People probably laugh at me. I mean, what is that? Like, you're already going into it losing. Go into it winning. I rather hope and believe I'm going to win and lose than believe I'm going to lose and then lose, right? At least I went to it positive, and that's probably going to give me a better chance at winning than going into it being, thinking I'm going to lose and low energy and just all this negativity. That's probably going to make me higher chance of losing.
Interesting. Going back to the question you stated, why are people why would they put themselves into one thing, right? Why would they identify with
I got
one
an
thing?
answer for that too, but I don't want to interrupt, but I thought of something right now, but go ahead.
I mean, I said because it's easy, but then that would lead back to, do you think it's easy to be negative? Is that why people are negative, because it's easier? Or is it hard to be positive?
Dude, I don't know. I'm weird probably.
Yeah.
I find it hard to be negative. I mean, it's like, it's a waste of time to be negative. Like, I find it very hard. Like, it's just so boring and so unproductive and just so Like, I don't, to me, it's harder to be negative. It's very easy to be positive. Very easy. So I don't know.
Interesting. That could tie into insecurity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See, that's my answer.
What I mean?
That's what I was going to tell you. Yes.
Oh, is that what you're going to say?
That's my answer. People only have one identity because of insecurity or some type of past thing that has made them insecure, right? Like, for example, a lot of teenagers I know, and I keep saying this, and I think it's probably because I'm surrounded by teenagers, but they put their identity in their boyfriend or girlfriend. And that's because something past has broken them or hurt them. And so they have to they have to feel that insecurity with a person. They like me, so I must be fine. But that's a very bad way, because what happens when they don't like you? Then now you're not fine again. So it is a result of insecurity. Identity, people put their identity in one thing as a result of insecurity.
Because and it could also be why negativity is maybe more prevalent, because negativity kind of feeds into that insecurity, right? So like, you view the world negatively because you view yourself negatively.
Yes.
Right? It's hard to view the world positively while you view yourself negatively.
I think that's why people, insecurity creates a lot of that stuff. You're exactly right, how you view the world. Like, I think that's why a lot of people hate on rich people, right? Because they don't believe that they could do what they done. So the easier thing to do is just hate on them to make themselves feel better because of insecurity. Not give them credit. Well, they are very smart. They worked very hard. They had the courage to take a risk to put themselves out there. No. They are just mean. They're evil. We hate them. Right? That's so much easier. Right? And I just don't like that. When it comes to rich people, I rather learn from them and accept that they had to do things to get to where they're at. Dude, I'm at 7%.
Yeah, let's get some final thoughts in, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thoughts I have. We could do a part 2 on this for sure.
Yeah, because I feel like we could go on and on about this topic.
We have a lot of part 2s we still got to do. So, you want to close?
Yeah. So, final thoughts, and it kind of ties in perfectly to our last episode, right? Insecurity kind of runs the world in a bad way.
Very bad.
A lot of people make decisions because of insecurity, and tying it back to identity. If you can identify yourself first by attacking any insecurities that you have about yourself, that could lead you to make more rational decisions and bring in those many streams of happiness and identity that could lead to a better life, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with you. I think insecurity is one of the problems that if you can overcome that, it's like a superpower in today's world. It's really a superpower, and you're just going to find your life getting a whole lot easier and a whole lot better. So
100% agree. And with that, we close episode 8